Smart is back in Australia, promising a raft of EVs over the coming years, and this is among the first to arrive. It's the #3 all-electric SUV, and it promises quality electric vehicle at affordable-ish prices, with the brand hoping to occupy the space between the cut-price Chinese models and the fully premium Germans. And there's even a go-fast Brabus model that'll peel your eyebrows back every time you stamp on the accelerator. All of which sounds pretty good, right? So let's go check it out. There are 3 threes available, the Pro Plus, the Premium and the Brabus, with prices starting at $57,900 before climbing to $61,900 and $70,900 before on-road costs. And that's a big jump from the Pro Plus to the flagship Brabus, and given the level of equipment offered right from the entry car, I think you're probably better off sinking your money into that entry-level vehicle, even if it does mean missing out on the prodigious power of the Brabus. See, even entry-level cars score 19-inch alloys, a panoramic roof, LED lighting, a powered tailgate, and a 12.8-inch central screen with wireless Apple CarPlay and Android Auto, and a 9.2-inch digital dashboard. The Premium then adds a head-up display, matrix headlights, leather trim, and a better beat stereo, while the Brabus scores a unique interior and exterior treatment, unique suspension, and a launch control function. Smart has nailed the design brief with the #3, in my humble opinion. Technically an SUV, but presenting more as like a high-riding, swept-back coupe. It's nicely proportioned, and it looks the business from most every angle. I particularly like the light treatment up front, where the headlights sort of bleed into the side bodywork, and they're linked by this solid light bar that spans the entirety of the front end. I also like the fact that there's nothing overly fussy or likely to age poorly anywhere in the design. Smart has made a big deal about how it's aiming for smooth, rounded edges that are light on the garnish, and the result is a design that feels like it will look every bit as modern 5 years from now. Inside, it's a win for the brand too, with lovely material choices, a shortage of hard and scratchy plastics, and plenty of tech, though the latter is occasionally infuriating. At 4.4 metres in length, just over 1.8 metres in width, and over 1.5 metres in height, the #3 is hardly massive, but it is cleverly packaged, and so serves up far more room in the back seat than you might imagine. In fact, Smart makes a big deal about the rear legroom being on par with the Mercedes-Benz E-Class, a much bigger sedan, and at a glance at least, that looks to be about right, with oodles of rear legroom, which can be further enhanced by sliding the back seat forwards or backwards by 15 centimetres to really maximise the space. At the rear, the auto-opening boot stores 370 litres, but that number grows to 1,160 litres with the rear seats folded, and there's a small 15-litre frunk up front. Towing is listed at 1.6 tonnes braked, but I suspect you're more likely to spot a bunyip than you are see a tow ball attached to the #3. So this Smart #3 is a rear-wheel drive setup, which is kind of rare in the world of EVs. Most of them have their electric motor up the front, although Polestar, another Geely brand, is also rear-wheel drive with the Polestar 2. Anyway, this one makes 200 kilowatts and 343 newton meters, which is enough to unlock a sprint to 100 kilometers an hour of 5.8 seconds. Now, there is a Brabus branded version which upsize outputs considerably, and that one drops your sprint to 100 to 3.7 seconds, and that is probably fast. I mean, that was supercar fast only a handful of years ago. Now, all Smart 3 models are set up with a 66 kilowatt hour battery, even the Brabus, unlocking a driving range of around 455 kilometers in this entry-level trim. When it does come time to charge, it's set up for 150 kilowatt DC fast charging. Okay, so welcome to the driver's seat of the Smart #3. And look, to be totally honest, I really don't see the hashtag thing joining the Australian lexicon, so from here on out, let's just call it the Smart 3, shall we? Now, this is the entry-level car, and although I've got to say it doesn't really feel like it from the cabin, it's not the Brabus with its extra outputs and faster 0 to 100 time, but it is also not slow. If you put your foot down, there is still plenty of get up and go, even in this entry-level, lower-powered model. 200 kilowatts and 343 newton meters, I guess, isn't to be sneezed at. There's plenty of grunt on offer here, even if you're overtaking on country roads at 80, 90 or 100 kilometers an hour. And Smart has promised that this is a Chinese car with a difference, and I've got to say, I don't know whether it's because I've got Mercedes-Benz echoing around my mind, or maybe because some of the switchgear in the cabin is familiar if you've ever driven a Mercedes-Benz A-Class, for example, but there does seem to be a sense of quality in the cabin. It's evidence from the kind of heft in the steering, which is also fairly sharp and fairly confidence-inspiring, but there's lots of feel through the pedals, as in you've got to really push it down to get forward momentum. It doesn't have that light flimsiness that you can find in some Chinese vehicles, which I guess is also reflective of this one's price point. And look, if you drive a lot of EVs, there is a kind of sameness to the way they deliver their power. It's hard to kind of differentiate them. Sometimes there's no gearbox to critique or engine to critique. And that is kind of similar here. It really is a point and shoot kind of device. You're playing your foot down and away you go. But it's also one that does definitely feel at least a small step ahead of some of its competitors, just in the sense that there is a premium air in the cabin, both in the drive experience and in your surrounds, which is pretty welcome. Now, we're on your typical kind of crappy Queensland back road here, and while the car itself is really quiet, and in fact in the city it felt super quiet, out on these roads you can start to get a little bit of wind noise in the cabin at speed, and on the coarse chip stuff there is a bit of tyre noise as well. But it's hard to tell whether that's more obvious because there isn't a lot of our other noise for it to compete with, so you do tend to notice it a little bit more maybe. Now, weirdly, Smart does build this as the sportier of its two models, certainly sportier than the Smart number 1, which we've been driving too. And it has got sport mode on board. In fact, it's got normal, eco and sport mode. But interestingly, it doesn't actually impact anything other than throttle response. It doesn't impact the steering, it doesn't impact the suspension or any of the chassis settings. In fact, you can make the steering heavier, but that's a separate function which you need to dig through the menus to activate. It doesn't come on automatically when you go through sport, which is a bit weird. Really, all you're doing is activating a slightly more reactive accelerator pedal. Now, it must be said, we haven't actually driven the Brabus yet. That is the sportier model of the family, and it might dial things up even further. But for an entry-level vehicle, this one feels pretty engaging. Now, I do have to add one fairly sizable caveat to the Smart drive experience, and that is that we just haven't driven it on anything overly challenging or for that long yet. So we're going to have to wait until we get this car through the CarsGuide office to give it a proper test and really report on what it's like to live with day to day and to escape the city in on the weekend. But on first impressions, I got to say it does do what it says on the tin. It does offer a little bit of premiumness at a Chinese-ish price tag. The hashtag 3 arrives wearing a 5-star Euro NCAP safety rating, and it gets a whole bunch of standard safety equipment. It begins with 7 airbags, but there's also lane keep assist, adaptive cruise, AEB, rear cross traffic alert, the list goes on. And in good news, only the speed limit warning, which can be switched off, felt overly intrusive, which is not something you can say about all Chinese-made vehicles. We don't love the warranty coverage, with LSH offering 5 years or just 150,000 kilometres, whichever comes first. For reference, other Chinese newcomers all exceed that number, with MG the best with a full 10 years of coverage. Still, service intervals are 12 months, and you should be able to take your Smart to any of the LSH Auto Mercedes dealerships or to the Smart service centres in Sydney, Melbourne or Brisbane. A Smart, if you'll excuse the bad pun, city-focused EV, and one that does feel more premium than most of its China-delivered rivals. It is an increasingly crowded field though, which is why I would have liked to see a more generous warranty period, which is about the only soft spot in an otherwise pretty strong offering.